Good morning and good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Claudio. I'm the regional advisor for the Digital Health and Information Systems for Health in PAHO. And on behalf of the Pan American Health Organization, I would like to thank you for joining this session of the community practice of the civil registration and vital statistics in Latin America and Caribbean. Today's webinar focuses on good practices for digital identity, a topic that is becoming increasingly important for strengthening civil registration systems, but also improving access to public services, enabling interoperability across government platforms, and supporting the digital transformation of the health systems. We are pleased to be joined by two distinguished experts from the World Bank. First, Yolanda Martínez Mancilla, practice manager for the digital development for the Latin American and Caribbean at the World Bank. Yolanda leads digital transformation initiatives across region and brings extensive experience of working at the local, national, regional, and global levels. We are also honored to welcome Claudio Muniz, a specialist in digital transformation and data governance at the World Bank, with broad experience in digital innovation, digital public infrastructure, and international development. We are grateful to both Yolanda and Claudia for sharing their knowledge and experience with us today. With further ado, I would like to invite Yolanda and Claudia to begin their presentation. Thank you, and the floor is yours. And also for the just a little practicality, there's a question and answer feature which we can take the questions and after the presentation, but the feature is there, so you can just type your questions during the presentation.
Thank you so much, Katri, and we feel very honored with the opportunity to be here today and be able to share what we are doing at the World Bank, different levels of engagements with countries. And since this is a webinar, for us it's very important to get to know who are we interacting with. So I kindly invite all of you to post in the chat your name and the organization that you represent. That way we get a sense of who is listening to this webinar and are able to provide more specific and relevant examples for the type of organizations that you represent. I'm going to be sharing the presentation today with my colleague Claudio. He's a senior consultant in the DPI and service team at the World Bank. If we go into the next slide, and the way we have structured the presentation is around three main areas. Sharing with you what we are doing at the Digital and AI Vice Presidency. Then going into what is DPI and how to best go around implementing DPI at scale, mainly using open source resources like CRVS and the linkage with digital ID. Then we're going to go into explore what is the landscape of digital ID in LAC and what efforts are we currently supporting in the region. And then we will have time for Q&A. So with that, thank you so much, Maria from Costa Rica, Caja Costarricense del Seguro Social. We know very well your work. Thank you for joining. Olga Marta. El chat está inhabilitado. Maybe colleagues moderating can allow the chat to be open so we can get to see who is connected. And if we go into the next slide, for those of you who are familiar with international organizations, we focus in three main areas. We focus in creating knowledge. In the case of NDBs, like the World Bank, we focus also in providing investment for countries to finance different projects. In the case of digital and AI, our focus is on financing projects related to closing the digital divide and to really leverage a digital economy that is inclusive and is productive and that it creates jobs. And we also are a convening space. So what we're doing today, which is sharing with colleagues in different organizations how we approach topics that digital ID is also in a main area. In 2024, the bank recognized that a change in the approach to digital engagement was needed, and the Digital and AI BPU was created. Our BP is Sambu Keen, and we focus our work around 4 main areas that are part of digital strategy. And like any organization, and this is the first call to action to all of you, it's very important that every organization, public, private, etc., has a digital strategy that sets the vision for where the organization is going. In the case of countries, it's usually a digital strategy or a national a digital agenda. In the case of international organizations like the bank, our board, which is the place where representatives from all the countries sit and take decisions about what the bank needs to focus on, approve our digital strategy, and approve recently our implementation plan. So that is our guiding framework on how we structure our knowledge activities, our investment projects, and our convening engagements. Our strategy focuses in 4 main areas. Closing the accessibility gap. So we focus here on a lot of investments related to making sure that every single person is connected to the internet. We have a very ambitious goal of 600 million people connected to broadband by 2030, out of which 300 million need to be women. We have a second pillar, which is affordability, and our effort here goes around making sure that there is sufficient market and resources that every person can access a device to use the internet and access digital services. The third pillar is the ecosystem pillar, and this is where our efforts on DPI sits. If you go into the next slide. And within the ecosystem, if you click, so the animation run, within the ecosystem, we work with 3 main areas: with governments to make sure that services are digitized at scale. And when we say at scale is by using a DPI approach, meaning modularity in how different building blocks of software are reusable across many different entities. Use interoperability standards, and are designed and deliver around anticipating user needs. We work a lot in making sure that there is adoption, and you will see some statistics as we move forward in the presentation on how this is one of the biggest challenges. It's not enough to have the connectivity, and it's not enough to have the building blocks, but really an approach to understand user needs and how to best design digital services around those user needs. Then we have digital industry and applications. And here is how, when a government sets a digital services standard with the right building blocks and DPI in place, really use the ecosystem around it, meaning GovTech, startups, academia, open source community, to support the design and delivery of many digital services around those DPI. Thank you so much, interpretation. I will speak slowly. Thanks for the highlight. And then the 4th pillar, if we move into the 4 main areas of the strategy, is around AI readiness. So a lot of what we do here is, of course, investment in having the right compute resources at the country level, and with that, more sovereignty on data protection and data management, but also on how, with the right DPI in place and all the data that is generated with an economy is digitized, can be leveraged to be more productive, can be leveraged to be more innovative. So with this framework, we're going to center today's presentations on our third pillar, which is DPI and digitization of government services using a DPI approach, specifically what is the trends and what countries are doing in terms of EID. So with that, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Claudio.
Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, colleagues. As this session has translation to Portuguese, I will take this opportunity to speak in my language. I'm Brazilian. Então, eu vou seguir a apresentação aqui, a partir de agora, em português. Vou dar pouco de tempo
Voy a
para
seguir
as
entonces
pessoas
en
mudarem
portugués. I'm going to do it in Portuguese, so I'm going to give time to people to change to their language channel in case you need to change for some need of interpretation. In regards to the infrastructure, public and digital infrastructures,
frente ao problema da existência de silos.
Thinking about the existence of silos, which is something very common in the various organizations and countries. So these three components are going to be the baseline of digital transformation for digital ID, payment means, and to be able to share data. And oftentimes they are implemented by separate, thus creating silos in the various sectors. And so with this problem in mind, we were able to find that a solution could be the implementation of digital information, which makes it a lot more efficient, inclusive, and safer as well. To be able to put these components together and share them among the various sectors in a comprehensive manner. Something like building blocks that can be implemented in any sector. I think most of the colleagues in this session are working with healthcare, probably, some of them with social issues. And so it's very common and necessary for these sectors to have systems to identify patients or beneficiaries from social programs. Oftentimes there are issues in the integration of information between these different programs. And so the synchrony or the lack thereof could cause issues. So doing it this way, it helps and facilitates the sharing of information and mostly access of the population to services. So that was the motivation we had in mind when we started creating our approach of the public digital infrastructure. In terms of the very conception of it, we understand that a necessary enabling element for this structure to actually work and the whole layers of access into the data infrastructure being the one that gives support to the digital environment, we strongly believe that CRVS systems and other registry bases are also necessary to be able to integrate information with quality so that they can be harnessed by the various components of the public digital infrastructure, thus enabling access to the population in an easier way. And as we've emphasized, it is important to provide access to the population for such services. So I'm going to show you an example and of the case of those services you have access to with the public digital structure. So for instance, for a person to receive a social benefit and transfer for whatever social situation, this is extremely easy when you have the public digital infrastructure implemented. So that payment can be done directly through a bank institution. And so information is needed for this transaction, and that's available within the social program management. and at the same time, being integrated with the digital part, this is going to enable identification and put together a target population, thus preventing possible fraud and also enabling access to the actual population to the service they need, which happens mostly with a platform where data can be shared and that allows for the various components to exchange data between all services so that the service can actually occur. So this is an example that could be, let's say, reproduced in the various sectors to evidence this integration, okay?
A identidade digital, olhando especificamente para a identidade digital, e a gente sabe que a América Latina,
the digital ID, we know that in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a region with an advanced degree of maturity when we talk about the system of ID registration. This is a system that has an access coverage to population for identification, and we know that there are still specific localized challenges, but generally speaking, having access to registration services is something the population can still have. However, there are some gaps that are still present in regards to that. So there is a big benefit in the digital part because people are able to have access to the services that are available in digital platforms. And that's an unavoidable trend as the population grows more and more, and it demands the use of digital ID in different ways and means. So that allows for safe transactions. It also allows to have a safer digital environment as well as it is usable with different mechanisms of digital ID, for instance, to prevent that minors could have access to services that are unsuitable for their age. Another mechanism has to do with digital ID, and that shows huge benefits, and its applications for service rendering has to do with digital signatures. The digital signature helps so that just as physical signature allows this person to confirm her desire or authorization for whatever transaction is needed. It also allows to complete transactions, making sure or ensuring that that person confirmed the transaction that that person signed for. So with the digital identity, we're able to activate these systems in an efficient and low-cost manner, making them affordable and accessible for the population. That is also a trend that is growing in the region. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that perspective at the end of our presentation. A trend I would also like to mention here is creating different digital portfolios, digital wallets. So as the documents are becoming digital, just as we use the physical wallet, and the European Union was pioneering in this digital wallet part to kind of safely store these digital documents in an integrated manner. And what's most important, it offers user control in the sense that information from digital documents can only be shared if the user allows for that information to be shared. Today, it's very common to work with internet portal transactions where you would have to go into registration points. And these points could be avoided because we know that there's an important difficulty in terms of information. So oftentimes those safeguards are insufficient. And with the use of digital wallets, you only have to share information that's needed for that specific transaction. So if you need to validate a person's age, you don't need to go through the whole registration. So what you have to do in terms of the age is when that age is a requirement for that specific transaction, also for the nationality, civil status, or marital status. I'd like to then share shortly two very recent publications launched this month by our team on digital wallets. And this is a presentation that will be shared with you all at the end. So we'll send you the link to access to these publications. Also, another publication that gives a detail and shows a systematized approach to what I'm telling you about in terms of the digital infrastructure, we also have available in the presentation and have easy access for you to download this publication with the link that you see there. And just to conclude my part, from the beginning, I have been telling you about the importance of the CRVS systems and digital systems. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the work our team has conducted in a forum that addresses this specific topic. I think it's very important that we can show you that we also play a role within this infrastructure, which is extremely relevant. So I'm not going to repeat what you already know, but in fact, the very source of information could be further used by the registration in the part of digital identity. So they give origin to the whole system, in this case, health services. The first intervention then from the government and people's collectiveness occurs in the health system precisely, in the moment of birth, and it ends in the moment of death, if we describe people's lives. So this is something that is used both for the civil registration, even if the identity is reported only physically, but also digitally. So that link, that information could be very common and known about in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we have emphasized this because in other regions, oftentimes the importance of this integration is not understood that way. There is no such natural integration that they have in Latin America and the Caribbean between the civil registration and the identity. So for that, we have developed some instruments to facilitate the implementation of solutions, with one of them being a model of diagnostic of ecosystems and identification that includes the civil registration, identity, and digital identity. Generally speaking, here we have this infrastructure to show how is the system put together. And so we highlight this case of use and how the system helps people access services. And we also created an institutional, a legal model, and in the end, we put together a series of recommendations so that it can respond to the most people that uses the system, with which is going to lead to projects and funding. Another project that has been quite useful is a platform, a georeference platform that enables the recollection of data from all services pertaining civil registration and identity, characterizing in these services what are the elements that are present, as with those of you who are connected, to see what is infrastructure available for the performance of the service, human resources, technology, etc., and also for the monitoring of service quality and access. So many countries still need the implementation to be able to understand the performance, to be able to conduct quality control and the access of population to these services. So this is a very useful instrument, and in some countries it's already been adopted. Another very interesting instrument has to do with the improvement of procedures. In this part that I'm showing you, we studied phase by phase all the processes of civil registration and identity to be able to see where is it that you are having some kind of challenge or deficiency, where can you identify gaps that are creating these boundaries for population access. And so with that, try and find the improvements that could afterwards be reflected and implemented into the system. That is also a very useful instrument in countries that are already adopting it. Unfortunately, no country in this region has adopted that model just yet. To conclude, we put together a document that contains, let's say, policies to be able to spread the importance of civil registration further in the integration with public digital infrastructure. This is the work that was done together with this entity. I don't know if you know them, but I want to thank this work with Vital Strategies. This partnership with Vital Strategies has been wonderful. So with this, I hand it over back to Yolanda. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Claudio. And following the guidance of colleagues in the interpretation, I will switch to Spanish to see if it works better. La siguiente, por favor. En esta tercera parte
So in this third part, this third block of our presentation, we are going to share how are we doing in Latin America and the Caribbean. So there are two big challenges I would like to have you guys think about. Keep in mind when we talk about digitalization of services, most specifically an enabler as important as digital ID. And one of them is the fact that in Latin America and the Caribbean, although we have many breakthroughs in progress in terms of coverage, internet access, use of devices, we still have a pending task in matters of the digitalization of proceedings and services. It is very important for all sectors, specifically the healthcare sector, can prioritize the having a specific work plan to be able to digitalize all services in this sector using an approach of a public digital infrastructure, which we are identifying here as DPI, to enable this process of speeding the digital means access for healthcare services. The colleagues in the UN with an agency called UNDESA issues one of the most complete reports every year in terms of maturity in digital governance. And one of the components they evaluate specifically is the degree of maturity and progress of the countries in digitalization of their proceedings and services. And when you see here with these little indicators, LC3, LC2, LC1, there in the top of the image, there's a group of countries that we put together in groups on the bank according to their location. LC3 is Caribbean, LC2 is Central America, LC1 is Colombia, Mexico, and Venezuela. LC5 is Brazil. Is one of the most advanced, as you can see, with 0.91. LC6 are the Andean countries, and LC7 has to do with countries in the very south. So you see very progresses, like in Brazil with CAPR, but we also have challenges in other areas. And why is this so relevant? Well, because it's not about an investment boundary in terms of technology. There are many resources, just as my colleague Claudio had mentioned, in terms of access to open source communities, implementation resources, best practices, and the design of services. But if there isn't an actual governmental entity in charge of putting together a digitalization agenda with a responsible team, with a roadmap, and with all of the resources needed for that to occur, and for these responsible teams to design the services, making groups of approach with the citizenship in the swiftest way and launching services every week, we're always going to have these big gaps. The other second challenge has to do with the fact that people don't find value to the use of digital services, and the colleagues of the International Association of Telecommunications are also publishing a very important study called Significant Connectivity. In other words, it measures how much have countries advanced in harnessing connectivity to be able to make their activities more productive. In this study, we're able to see, I'm sorry, we're losing her signal. 60% of the company in Latin America are having challenges in these transactions. So a big challenge. We have our big campaigns of inclusiveness and the ownership in the region to have communication networks that can work together with national plans of digital inclusion that can encourage people to use digital services as a preference access channel to those services. Okay, how are we specifically doing in terms of digital public infrastructure, and why is it so relevant? There's a big effort done by the colleagues from the London University called the DPI mapping. And this is something I really and highly recommend for you to have, where all information resources are available for the free access of everybody. So on this first map, you'll notice that we are talking about how countries are doing in the spread of the use of digital identity to access to other services. The countries in green already have national digital identity established, which are linked to the national identity of people, and that can be used to access to so many other services. You can see that the south area, the southern part of the region, is pretty much covered with CAPR has over 100 million users. 83 million of them are using a level 3 and safety that allows them to access to bank services, work with trans-border transactions, as we'll see afterwards. And then we have those in yellow that have big efforts in terms of digital identity, such as Mexico, with an important and very aggressive agenda from doing from home. So the BMX could be of mandatory use as a mechanism for authentication in all the systems of service rendering. In the second map, we find what's the progress in terms of the use of digital payment. And you can see on the screen how most countries are in green. So this is an important breakthrough in terms of financial inclusiveness, and it is one of the components that are the most important in the digitalization of services that do require payment. And the third map is showing us how countries are doing in terms of using infrastructure for interoperability or data exchange, which in the case of the healthcare sector, it's very important to be able to link the digital identity and how that enables so many other services in this healthcare sector, but it also having an effect in others like civil registration, education registrations, social records, etc. Why is it so important to strengthen digital identity? Okay, because once you enable access to service in the countries, Digital identity can also enable access of a citizen that is in one country to enable service portals into another. So as an ex-president of the GEAL network, which is a network that helps in Latin America and the Caribbean to be able to now participate from the bank to promote the regional interoperability agenda, is a pleasure. And this is an effort that has been going on for quite a while on the network, a network that puts together all digital governance authorities in the region through the UA, which is funded by the colleagues of the International Development Bank. So when we start looking at the important need to strengthen the regional efforts, we created the Digital Citizen Consortia, LAC. Then we Conco Develop, which is Public Digital Infrastructure Fund, to be able to create a common fund to allow us to define a mutual model of identity. And everything that I'm sharing with you is public. I want to invite you to scan the QR code that you see on screen, because that's going to take you to the link where you find all the information. Why is that IDLAC so important, IDLAC so important? Because it's a practice example of the sovereignty of the regional public existence. Those that created the consortia, the World Bank, the Inter-American Bank, and CODEVELOP, is to provide funding and to respect the guidelines and agreements that the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean have defined as a baseline to be able to develop this broker use to be able to recognize their identities. And this is a very important principle to be able to encourage that it be done through the GL network, the technical groups where countries send their experts to define how could we imagine this broker, what are going to be the technical specifications, how are we going to work with the data exchanging without any of us in the consortia having to impose some kind of specific technology. And this is very important in terms of sovereignty. Once technical teams specified or were able to establish the specs, there was a call done to receive proposals. And once that was done, they decided which software company was going to develop that. And this software is open code. It's a regional public good, and it is through technical teams of digital identity and interoperability that we're going to be updating technical specs. Up till today, this was launched in March 2025, but up to today, more than 12 countries have joined in to commit with working and the use of this broker. This was done in Brazil. So I want to invite you to use your COBR identity to access the many services available in the portal of the government of Uruguay. As this grows, what we're trying to go after is to make this very easy for anybody to interact in any of the region's portals to access the services. So as a Mexican, if I need to go to Brazil, I can use already the BMX already to access the several services available when I moved to Brazil, like to ask for a driver's license, for a medical appointment. That's recognizing in Brazil what is my ID mechanism that was issued in Mexico by the Digital Transformation Agency and the National Registration of Population. The region has many good experiences, such as the healthcare passport. When back in 2019, most healthcare departments started to adopt the European standard for the electronic medical certificate, the vaccination certificate. And this is something we want, and we're convinced that from the bank, we're going to be able to strengthen these spaces of common design, such as the HIAL network, which is one of the most efficient ways to work with this digitalization processes in the region and be more competitive.
cómo funciona el broker.
How is it that this broker works? Okay, this is a software component which basically allows to recognize identity tokens from each of the countries. Each of the countries recognizes the levels of security and the process which each country had customized to be able to provide that digital identity. And then they validate that the ID used by that citizen has been issued by a valid authority, giving them access to the service portal of the country they want to go into. So if I'm from Brazil and I like mate, then I can use my COP VR to access to that preceding expert certificate to purchase this mate herb to use my authentication mechanism that was issued by my country in another governmental portal. So, international standards that are recognized internationally are used like ID Connect. And here's what's very important to have the participation of all the countries. As the healthcare sector, you are a sector that is very advanced in these standards. Most of you uses HL7, but this is key. But because as we increase the level of digitalization of proceedings and services in the region, it also becomes more important to have an active participation in international agencies where these standards are defined. One of them is ITU, ISO communities, and other communities. Something very important in the one before is that the development of this block is agnostic to the cloud infrastructure where you need to create a deployment of this technology. And this is also very important in terms of sovereignty, of how decisions are being made with technical specifications and how a requirement from the countries has been, okay, as this broker allows me to recognize digital ID from different countries, if I am a federated country, for example, Mexico, then I can use the same broker so that the states that have full autonomy can use this reusable component for multiple identities recognition. In the case of Mexico, they use KVMX. But if that wasn't the guideline, the broker could have been used to facilitate that internal exchange in a federated country. What are the benefits? Okay, first, the most or the simpler that we do this for a person to be able to know about his, her user and password and what kind of services are being covered by these levels of identification, the fastest the use is going to be scaled up. For the governments, it facilitates the integration of various records, thus respecting data protection, making sure that a reusable component is kept, such as ID, digital ID with the various levels of security, because it is simpler to keep a reusable component than multiple components to identify one individual, which would otherwise generate a risk in terms of vulnerability, of cyber vulnerability. And in terms of benefits for the region, it accelerates the development of our digital economy. The most services are digitalized in the public and private sectors to use digital identity to be able to identify the individual. The easiest it is to be more competitive. It is very complex, and probably you already do, to have the ability to remember various users and passwords for my bank services, my academic services, my governmental services, my healthcare services. Instead of that, if we all use a standardized mechanism of digital identification, then the use is one that will be scalable, which is one of the greater challenges we have to be more competitive as a region. And to conclude, we would like to share with you the various regional initiatives we launched from the very practice of the Digital ID and the World Bank. And we do it with a strong commitment to bring value to all member states and the bank beyond the projects that we may have in terms of investment. I already shared with you one of them, which is the Digital Citizen Initiative, LAC, LIC. And it's the same principle where all countries here in this call are members of the RDA. Those of you partaking from the network are the digital authorities in your countries. So we want to invite you all to be very close and coordinated. Like in the case of Mexico, they put there that there are colleagues from the healthcare department. This is the National Agency of Digital Transformation in Mexico that have a very active participation in the network. In Uruguay, SAGESIC, in the case of Brazil, will be the team of digital governance and so on and so forth. And so they partake very actively, and so what we're after, as the number of countries using the broker for the mutual recognition of identities, we're looking forward to enable the most services possible. Uruguay already has done more than 300, very much focusing to commercial services. And for the years to come, we want to be able to enable use cases in all sectors, where healthcare is one of the most important ones. And this is a continuous effort, so you can count with on the World Bank to be able to provide leverage on all your digitalization efforts in the region. The second initiative is called Vincula LAC, and this is an open call to any instance of the government, any sector, to participate, and this is to be able to work with programs of digital abilities to develop scholarships, having full access to the platform. We've already launched the first cohort, and we're preparing the second call, and when we have it ready, we will share it with all our colleagues that have so kindly invited us to this webinar so that you can help us spread this information with all of you. The third initiative is a global initiative, and it's a challenge for women in technology, which is completely open to all sectors. So if you have colleagues in your digital teams, in your various entities, this is a challenge to use in 6 weeks a various set of reusable components for developing services, for payments, for identity, but focusing on women mostly, or specifically recognizing that there's a small percentage of women in the sector. So when we have that already, we also share with you to have a lot of representatives from the healthcare sector. And the fourth initiative is ongoing. I expect several of the colleagues that applied to it are here with us. This was the AI Accelerator from LAC. This is a work program for 6 months. We launched it in cooperation with Coursera, with Tunneler Institute, and AT&T Data, with the purpose to choose various cases of use, so that with several weeks of very specific technical consultancy, they can use these cases in the use of AI. All this information is public, and one of the most recurring cases in this first cohort of the accelerator is precisely the healthcare sector. So we expect to be able to share these results very soon. We're already in the 4th month of the accelerator, and we're already preparing the second interaction. So all ideas you may have are more than welcome. And with this, we move to the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. I can see that there are, the few questions in the chat function.
Buenos días. El registro de datos
Natalia Carpio asks, good morning. The biometric registration, data registration and digital, just as fingerprint, can be used to identify population for documents such as the informed consent?
Sim, de fato, o uso das informações biométricas é parte integrante do processo de identificação.
Yes, in fact, that
Então,
is
quando a
part
gente
of the
fala no
process identification, the
ecossistema
biometric
de
part.
identidade,
So
justamente a gente
talking
vê os
about the
diferentes componentes.
ecosystem
Em
of
geral, o
identity,
registro civil e certidão
it has several
bancária, eles não
components in
coletam
general
dados
where digital
biométricos.
registration
Essa
is
informação ela é
not
coletada no
collecting
momento da
biometric data. This is
identificação.
a data
E
that
essa
is collected
segregação
upon
de
identification,
coleta
and
de
that
dados,
segregation
ela tem
of
sentido
data
porque
recollection
permite você ter
makes
controle
sense
maior,
because
vamos dizer, sobre as
it helps
informações
you
biométricas que
have
são
further
consideradas
control
globalmente
on biometric
dados
information
sensíveis, no
that
sentido
is
legal
gathered
do termo.
globally and considered
Porque
as
os
sensitive data in the
dados
legal
biométricos, eles não
sense
podem
of the
ser
term, because
alterados, né?
biometric data
Se por alguma falha de
cannot be
segurança esses dados
operated.
forem utilizados
Should there be any
indevidamente,
security
isso pode
failure
prejudicar
that
bastante
uses
as
such
pessoas.
data in an
Então,
improper
a
way, that could
informação
really
biométrica ela pode ser
affect
sim
people.
utilizada
So
no
biometric
processo de
information can be
consentimento,
used,
né,
yes, in the
informado,
process
né?
of informed
Ele é
consent,
recomendado no sentido de que as pessoas tenham
and
consciência
it is
do uso, né, dessa
advisable,
informação.
even in
Então,
the sense
obrigado
of
pela
people
pergunta, é
having
muito
the need
importante.
to use that information. So that's a very important, good question.
Thank you, Claudio. I don't see any other question. I don't know if someone is raising their hand, if we can see someone is raising the hand. And just to complement what Claudio was sharing, it's very important when using biometric data is that the use allowed for identifying the person once, then that person can use their digital signature to sign any administrative act, meaning to sign consent, to sign a form to request a particular service related to education, related to health, related to a driver license. Once the person has been identified and biometric is part of that identification, the issuance of the digital ID, either as a verifiable credential or in some countries in a plastic card with the certificates available there, it's used to sign anything. And that's a very important benefit of a digital ID, and can be used not only to request services, but also in the public sector to sign anything. So, for example, doctors sign medical recipes, and usually they sign in hand and even have a seal. The digital the identity could be used also as a digital signature. You have that technology, mostly level 3, to sign documents. If you are, for example, in Mexico and you access to birth certificates, if you look at the digital signature of the birth certificates, is the digital signature of the authority in the civil registry that certifies that the outcome of the consultation to the National Registration of Population reflected in a document that is called birth certificate is a copy of your data available in the National Population Registry. That certification is given by an authority from the civil registry that is using his or her digital signature to certify that the data is you. If you get your cédula profesional, is exactly the same standardized format of electronic document. The signature is the digital signature of the public servant in the Ministry of Education that is issuing that document. And in the case of Mexico, we use the certificate of the digital signature to identify a person, but also to sign a document. So the more we standardize the use, the easier it is for appropriation from the citizen, because then they see value on being identified, not only to save time, but also because they can kick off many other requests using their identity to sign documents when the technology allows it.
Thank you so much, Yolanda, and thank you so much for the Claudio for the present very information-rich presentation. At least for me, it was very useful. And thank you for the World Bank, to collaborate, with the community of practice for the civil registration and statistics. We highly appreciate of this. Before we closing, we have only 1 minute time left for the translations. I wanted
Katri,
to.
there is one more question. Can we address
Was
it
it?
quickly?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, from Liliana, voy a cambiar al español.
Yeah, sí,
¿Cuál
sí.
sería
I'm
la
going to switch
estrategia
to Spanish then.
logueo
What
eficaz,
would be the
fácil
strategy
y seguro
for
para
efficient
población que esté
logging that
privada
is easy
de la
and
libertad?
safe for
Claudio,
the
you want to
freedom-deprived
comment on this?
population? Claudio, you want to comment on that?
Bom, essa é uma questão bastante interessante, né? Em termos de identificação, né?
Okay, in
Essa
terms
é
of
uma
identification, this is very interesting because this
tem
is
sido enfrentada em alguns países, né? Se
something that
estabelecem
has to do
processos
with the countries to
especiais
establish
para
special
fazer a
processes to
identificação
be
dessa
able to
população.
work
Caso
with
elas
the
não tenham uma
identification of such
identificação ainda,
population in
o
case
exame no
they
sistema é
don't
pedido.
have an
Para a
identification
identidade
just
digital,
yet in the
o
system.
processo
So
é o
for
mesmo.
digital
Né? Eu não
identity, the
conheço
process is the same.
especificamente nenhum caso
I
de
don't
implementação
specifically
de identidade
know of
digital para
any
pessoas
case
que estão em
of
situação
digital ID
de paraíso
implementation
prisional,
for
mas
individuals that are deprived of
legalmente o
freedom or
processo é o mesmo,
in prison.
ok?
But
Bom,
legally
se for para
speaking,
depois
that's
até
already
enviar
usable. So
por
if the
e-mail,
person
tenho interesse em
could
tentar entender um pouco melhor
afterwards send
esse
us an
problema e
email
eventualmente
showing interest to understand further
tentar
about
detalhar
it
um pouco mais,
and eventually
ok?
try
Muito
to
obrigado. Eu acho que a gente poderia também
give a
compartilhar
further detail on
os
that,
nossos
then
e-mails
we
no
could
chat.
look into it and then
Y
address
complementando lo
that
que comparte Claudio,
question.
porque ya estamos sobre el tiempo.
And
Una vez que las
complementing what
personas
Claudia had
se
said, since
identifican,
we're out of
si
time now,
por
once
alguna razón
people are
están en un
identified
estatus de
and for some
privación de
reason
su
they
libertad,
are in
es un
a
estatus
freedom
particular de
deprivation
esa
status,
persona
that is a
y el
specific
uso de
status for that person,
sus recursos de
and the
identificación
use
son
of
atributos de la
identification
persona.
resources are
Si están en una etapa
personal
donde apenas
attributes.
están enrolando a la
If they're in
población
a
en toma de
situation when they're
biométricos y en
recently
dar
entering
su
into the
mecanismo de
imprisoned
identidad, entonces sí hay
population,
que
the
tener un proceso muy
biometrics and
particular de
identity
cómo se va a hacer
mechanisms,
ese
then they do have to
enrolamiento.
go
Pero
through
al final,
a
el objetivo de los
specific
planes nacionales de identificación es tener
way to do
al
it, but the
100% de la
national
población
identification plans
enrolada.
do mention
Esperemos
having the
que desde el
100% of the
nacimiento, porque uno
population
de los grandes
enrolled.
retos es el
The
subregistro.
expectancy of it is
Si
to have
tenemos un
that
buen
from
registro
birth.
nacional de
Because if we
población,
have a good
de toda la
national
población,
population
es
registration
una
for the
base muy
whole
importante para
population,
que
that
ese
is,
registro
that will be an
permita
important
identificar a la persona
baseline
en el
for
mundo
that
digital.
registry
En la
to identify
mayoría
the
de nuestros
person in the
países, en el
digital
caso de México,
world.
ya BMX
In most
requiere
of
la
our
CUR.
countries,
La
and
CUR
in Mexico,
es
for
el
instance,
número que se nos
the
da a los
BMX
mexicanos y que vive en el
already
Registro
requires
Nacional
the
de Población
CUR,
desde
which
el
is
nacimiento.
Mexicans'
Y eso habilita
identification
que
from
después nos
birth,
podamos
and that
identificar en el
enables
mundo
us to be able to
digital.
identify ourselves in the digital world later on.
Como lo comentó Claudio, estamos
As
a la
Claudio
orden
said,
y muchas
we're
gracias,
there for you.
Katri,
And so
por
thank you,
permitirnos
Katri,
compartir lo que estamos
for
trabajando
allowing
desde
us
el
to
Banco
share what we're
Mundial. Y
working
muchas
with from
felicidades
the
por
World
organizar
Bank,
esta
and
sesión.
congratulations for putting this session together.
Well, thank you again, Yolanda and Claudio. The work that the World Bank is doing is really impressive. I think one of the leading institute and development bank, like with the identification programs and at the global level. So thank you for this. Before we closing, I just wanted to share, that as a part of the digital literacy program, the next one will be the Health in Thursday, July 9th, 11 o'clock, as usual, with the simultaneous interpretation, and the topic will be the verbal autopsy for estimating causes of death in the absence of medical certification. And the verbal autopsy also have the AI enhanced tool developed by the WHO. So we will hear, the more about that on the Thursday, July 9th, and the presenter will be Swedish Tropical Institute. So thank you so much, and have a rest of the week and the day, and the presentation and the recording will be available on the PAHO website. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.